I would like to dedicate today's episode to all the women out there. Today's topic, perimenopause and menopause. And if you are going through this transformation in your life right now and you feel maybe unsupported, alone, and frustrated, it's very difficult to get support going through this process, then today's episode is for you. I have special guest on, Aimee Gallo. This is the second time Aimee is on, and I'm so excited to talk to her today. She is a double-degreed nutritionist with 20 years experience empowering thousands to have the health they need to live a life they love. And that's exactly how we're going to talk about these two topics today. How can you go through this transformation feeling supported, not alone, and actually thrive? Let's get into it. You're listening to the Soul Aligned Self-Care Podcast. I'm your host, Tina Stinson, and I had a stroke at the age of 39 from stress and burnout that shook my world. Now I'm laying it all out, the deep level self-care practices and mindset shifts that I needed that kept me healthy, balanced, and thriving. Join me in this intimate space as we explore healing, resilience, and the soul's journey to alignment. This is where real conversations about deep-level self-care happen. Let's get into it. Hello, Aimee. Welcome to the Soul Aligned Self-Care Podcast, or I should say welcome back. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Tina. I'm really happy to be back.
Yeah, it's really good to see your face. And I'm so excited about today's topic. We were chatting just a second ago, right before we started, and I'm very passionate about this topic because this is my life right now. And so today we're talking about perimenopause and menopause and what we could do to help empower women to make this the best possible experience that they could have, and maybe even try to look at it as a positive thing in some ways. So to get started, I would love for you to talk about um, maybe some of like your experiences that you've had with perimenopause and menopause, either yourself or with your clients,
Mhm.
and some of the really common symptoms that women are experiencing,
Mm.
in your realm.
Yeah. I'll start by speaking personally. I'm 46, and for all intents and purposes, like my right now, my easing into perimenopause has been relatively light. I have noticed things that I wasn't really sure because it wasn't, you hear the obvious things, hot flashes, mood swings, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
right? But some of the things I noticed is that my gums have started to get very sensitive, particularly right before my cycle begins. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely do feel more moody. It feels, and I've talked with some of my friends about this, it almost feels like entering a second adolescence
Yeah.
where there
Relatable.
are moments where I feel where I feel so emotionally strung out, for lack of a more compassionate term. And logically, I'm like, why am I freaking out so much about this thing? Why has this got me so riled up? And it, really harkens back to adolescence when you're a teenager and the littlest things just totally set you off. And of course, as is the case with PMS in general and fluctuations in hormones, whether it's adolescence or adulthood or perimenopause, if there are underlying stressors in your life that, that increases your stress and your overall stress tolerance becomes less. And that's really something that I think is an important concept to grasp and integrate with whatever is happening for you, however your symptoms are showing up, is this is a period of time when we have reduced stress tolerance. This
Mm-hmm.
can show up emotionally and it can show up physically. So the more you have your stress managed to the degree that you can, entering into and transitioning through perimenopause into menopause, the more empowered you can be to ride those waves and the less chaotic and disruptive those waves can be.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm 57, And I would say actually, let's raise a glass, pretend glass, and celebrate because this is the month that it would be exactly a year since my last cycle. So I am like, yeah, thank you. Officially in menopause, which is wonderful. But at the same time, I remember my first symptoms being anxiety and not really acknowledging it
Yeah.
until I was, and it was like pretty extreme where I used to drive all over the place, traveling and stuff like that, and not even think twice about it. And then I started having panic attacks driving across a
Mm,
bridge, and I was like, "What is this?" The first time it happened, I was like, "What is this?" And then it became a problem, and then it became something I had to deal with, and I was like, it was just so foreign to me, and I didn't really connect that with perimenopause until I started.
yeah.
I was dating a gynecologist, and he actually said that to me, and I was like, "Huh." And then I started looking into it, and I was like, "This is so interesting." And then I really started to, as you said, really, really, really get down to the nitty gritty about handling my stress levels and doing
Hmm.
everything I possibly can to reduce that. And it's not about like one like magic thing that you do. It's about all these little things put together that really help you feel better. And it could feel a little overwhelming. Um, I have to say, as I got closer to menopause, my symptoms just went crazy, like, and they
Hmm.
would fluctuate. So like one last year, like at the beginning of the year, my blood pressure went really high for no reason. I had every test done on the face of the earth. Nothing was wrong with me. Um, and it had a lot to do with anxiety again, once again. But my
Yeah.
cholesterol levels went up, just all of a sudden, and then they normalized out again, which was like weird. Um, hot flashes that just started like a little while ago, and then it very
Mm,
recently stopped, knock on wood, like nothing now. But like, I would be sleeping and I would just wake up like all sweaty, and it would very disruptive sleep. I have very disrupted sleep. I usually sleep really, really good. Now I sleep
yeah.
like every other night, and
Hmm.
it's just really
That
interesting.
checks.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
And then, of course, when you don't get good sleep, that checks. That
Yeah,
absolutely
okay.
checks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the disrupted sleep, I'm getting that too.
Mm-hmm.
Sleep is very touch and go, which is really common. And then when you're sleep deprived, your ability to handle stress is a lot lower. So
Mm-hmm.
it can be this compounding cycle that's really challenging to navigate, particularly when, as you just shared, your symptoms come and go, they fluctuate in severity,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really a time where a lot of my clients are like, I don't know what this body is, but it's nothing I'm used to, and I don't know how to deal with it.
Exactly.
And
That's
that's kind of,
That's exactly that. I mean, it's like I can compare it to like a butterfly, like, the metamorphosis. It's like your whole body is completely changing because you're losing your estrogen, among other things
mhm,
that are going on in your hormonal system. And that affects every system in your body. So it's almost like
exactly,
everything that you learned about yourself up until this point is off the table and you have to start over. So that's something I feel like
precisely.
if we accept that and then go from there, I feel like it's easier almost.
100%, 100%. The more you fight this process, the harder you're making it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I can't say I'm particularly excited for what could come down the path for me, but I get to be alive long enough
Mm-hmm.
to make this transition. And that in and of itself is something to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that I mean we can all agree that it's really nice not to have your period. Like if we could pick one of the simplest things, that would be it, and not having to worry about getting pregnant, like that too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just
I
like
actually really like my period.
you
Yeah, I do. I do. I refer to her as Aunt Flo. And I really appreciate and this is not a common, at least from at least from my experience, this isn't very common, but I have a very regular cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I am under periods of high stress, I have very few symptoms. And so for me, my menstrual cycle has been this very consistent rhythm in my life that in many ways grounds me
Mm-hmm.
and also gives me an understanding for some of the ebbs and flows in my own energy and my own motivation and things like that. It is a companion that is always with me when I travel. 3 out of 4 times that I am on a train, on a plane, or traveling somewhere, Aunt Flo shows up either the day before, sometimes at the gate while I'm waiting to board the plane. I've
Of
had my
course.
period show up just because she loves to travel.
Yeah.
Um, and at first, it was it was like, what is this about? Why is this happening? And it really doesn't seem to, it isn't, it's been going on for 7 or 8 years, very
Mhm.
consistently. And it's a weird little biological quirk that I have. It is granted sometimes a huge pain in the butt. But it's also like, this is my body. Aunt Flo's a little quirky. She loves to travel as much as I do. So I just got to get used to it. And I will grieve losing my cycle, I think, even though I will be super, super happy that I don't have to worry about an unexpected pregnancy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really nice. And I think
Mhm.
that your cycle could really be embraced, working with it, knowing how it affects you in different ways, and using that knowledge to do certain things at certain times.
Yeah.
Know when you need to rest, know when you can push, when you have the ability. Know when you're feeling social, knowing when you need to go inward. So I think it's really nice if you can connect with your cycle like that, and you have a regular cycle. That's beautiful. I My cycle was very regular, but it was very like abrupt and like very
Mm,
heavy. And so sometimes it stopped me from going out of the house,
right.
So, um, and I think I had it for a long time. I started when I was 8, and then I
Oh,
stopped when I'm
wow.
56. It's like, come on now. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I've not been that blessed
yes, yes, I was
with
very
such a
blessed, very blessed. So anyway, but yeah, like transitioning into um, talking very quickly about how women are really underserved during this time in their life. There's not a lot of
100%.
research. There's not a lot of doctors that are even trained to deal with this. And then at the same time, very unwilling to really um, start start to kind of educate themselves in order to help their patients. And I myself have been faced with this among many thousands, hundreds of thousands probably of women, that you go to your doctor and they're just like, well, that's the way it is. And, there's nothing you could do. And, let me just put you on some high blood pressure medicine and cholesterol medicine and whatever other kind of pills they can give you. And, maybe like some antidepressants and blah, 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 and so on. And I don't want to take pharmaceuticals. So
Yeah.
I think with this experience, while there are some women that really have the blessing of being able to work with a doctor that has that knowledge, and maybe if it's available to them, can take part in HRT or hormone replacement therapy, that's wonderful, but it's just not feasible for a lot of women or even available for a lot of women. And so I'd love to talk about some of the things that we can do to empower ourselves to feel better, as far as nutrition, as far as
Mm.
physically, you have to change the way you do things, and then also mentally. And
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
starting with like diet. So, what are some of the things that we can do diet wise that could really benefit us and help us stay strong throughout this transition, especially like our bones and stuff like that?
Hmm. Yeah, as you mentioned, things totally change during this phase of life. And a lot of the women that come to me say, I've changed nothing. And what I've always done that has worked is not working. And yes, of course, because your body's not the same body.
Hmm.
And with the wildly fluctuating estrogen levels and the hormones, the impact of that on the system, it's not the same system. It does not process foods the same way it did pre-perimenopause. It doesn't receive physical activity in, it doesn't give you the same results from your physical activity that it did perimenopause. Estrogen helps us maintain our muscle mass, and it also makes us insulin sensitive.
Hmm.
So as our estrogen levels drop or they become unstable, we become more insulin resistant. And so our blood sugar can go up, our cravings can go up. And with chronically elevated blood sugar also comes an increase in inflammation in the body. Estrogen is anti-inflammatory as well. So, independent of the impact of glucose on your blood sugar, the loss of estrogen creates a more inflammatory environment.
Yeah.
So, transitioning to a more anti-inflammatory diet, right? More than ever, it's important to transition out of uh, the regular habitual consumption of, going through the drive-through on the way home from work because it's just easier,
Hmm.
of sitting down and having a glass of wine after dinner to relax. These little habits that we often use to reduce our stress creates additional physiological stress on the body, even though they may be emotionally stress reducing.
Hmm.
So it really is a almost a call to action to elevate your wellness habits and your self-care routine to something that is more beneficial to the body. The loss of estrogen also then means that when we are exercising, we're less easily able to put on muscle and get some of those beneficial gains that we received earlier in life. So with the loss of muscle comes an increased risk of loss of bone density. Again, independent of estrogen's bone protective effects, because our muscle mass pulls on the bone, right? Whenever we move, the muscle pulls on the bone, and that is stimulating to the muscle.
Hmm.
So the more muscle mass we have, the more we use that muscle, then there's more of an interplay between the muscle and the bone, and it encourages the bone to stay dense because it's being stimulated to do so.
Hmm.
So with regards to nutrition, maintaining an anti-inflammatory diet, which means lots of colorful vegetables,
Hmm.
fruits, berries are fantastic. They're just gorgeous, gorgeous fruits for our cardiovascular system, for our brain health, for our heart health. And the dark purple polyphenols in fruits also protect the gut and the bones.
Hmm.
So they are my favorite fruits. I'm very biased towards towards berries from a nutritional standpoint. And they are extremely anti-inflammatory. Now, in addition to a vegetable and fruit-rich diet, it's also crucial in this stage of life to increase your protein intake.
Yes.
And this is because without that safeguard of estrogen to send a signal to the body to hold on to muscle mass, we start to lose muscle. And protein itself can act as a stimulus to encourage muscle retention because it contains an amino acid called leucine. And leucine is like a messenger that tells the body muscle is important. Let's make sure to keep it.
Hmm.
Let's hold on to what we have. And then if you are doing weight-bearing physical activity, let's increase it if there's, sufficient enough stimulus to do so. Now, one of the things that a lot of women chronically do is underestimate how much protein they're getting.
Yeah, that is so true. I agree with you. Just personal experience and going on an app like Chronometer or
Yeah.
and like starting to just like log what you're eating. And then when you realize how little protein that you're actually getting, it's like Wow. And then trying to increase that protein can be challenging, but once you figure out a few things, it gets easier as you start to tweak it.
It does. And it takes time. Protein
Hmm.
is an incredibly satiating macronutrient. It's
Hmm.
very filling. And I would say most people that come to see me often need to increase their protein by about 50%.
Hmm.
So 1.5 times of what you're usually eating.
Yeah.
So just as for the listener, take a look at your average protein serving at your meals and start to think about increasing it by half,
Hmm.
adding 50% more of that protein to your plate. And that's a really good place to start as a broad generalization. Some
Hmm.
folks need to actually double the amount of protein that they're consuming. It depends on a myriad of individual factors, right? So the protein piece is crucial. It also helps with stabilizing blood sugar, which is really, really important as we're going through that perimenopause transition and postmenopause as well, because of the increased insulin resistance that happens when our estrogen levels start to drop.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
again, we become more insulin resistant. We are less able to tolerate carbohydrates. And so choosing carbohydrates that come from non-starchy vegetables, and some people may be thinking, "Wait, vegetables aren't a carb, they're a vegetable."
Hmm.
But from a structural standpoint, vegetables are considered carbohydrate foods because of the fiber it
Hmm.
contains. Fiber is structurally a carbohydrate, but it has very minimal impact on the blood sugar. And so your most fiber-rich foods that contain lower amounts of starch, such as your leafy green vegetables, peppers, onions, things of this nature, right? Your lower carbohydrate, lower starch vegetables are a wonderful source of carbohydrate. And you'll find that reducing the starchier carbohydrates that come from grains, that of course come from sugar, which is also very inflammatory,
Hmm.
and juices will help you maintain your weight as you're transitioning through perimenopause into menopause and will also help stabilize your blood sugar and keep you from developing prediabetes or full-blown diabetes as you make that transition.
Yeah, it's super challenging. I have to say, I've definitely experienced like the stomach, the middle weight gain there, that little blob that
Hmm.
comes and not terrible, but it's very true that the things that you once did don't really work anymore, and you have to really be careful. As you know, I do eat a plant-based diet.
Yep.
I'm not like a strict vegan or anything like that, but I do eat eggs. Sometimes I do eat a little bit of dairy. I'll end up buying like Greek yogurt just because it's so easy to add protein that way.
Yes.
Because the
And it
plant-based
is a
yogurt,
wonderful source of calcium.
yeah, I eat a lot of greens. I eat a lot of berries because I grow my own berries and I don't have to pay $12 for a
Mm.
little thing from the food store. I would encourage everybody out there, if you have a plot of grass on your property, to plant a raspberry and a blueberry bush because you will be blessed with years and years of berries that are organic and they don't really cost a lot, and it's so beneficial to your health. It's one of the and it looks like a bush, like how could you go wrong? But
Yeah,
yeah, the balance between everything is, and it could be really challenging. And I find myself cutting
absolutely.
out things like bread that I love. I love
Hmm.
bread, just because there's no like benefit to it. There's no benefit. Like, so I end up cutting it out, and then I'll end up like missing it so much, and then I'll have like a week where I eat like a whole loaf of bread. Um, but I feel
Yeah,
like you just got to do the best that you can. And I
absolutely.
I tracked my nutrients for a couple of weeks just to see, and I found it really challenging to get the amount of protein. I was trying to get 30 grams at every meal, and
Mhm.
that was challenging, that alone. And
Yeah.
I I ended up buying protein powder because I was like, this just makes it a little bit easier adding protein powder to my oatmeal. I tried adding it to my coffee, but ugh,
You
I try.
have to,
I
you
tried.
cannot add it to black coffee. It does not, it doesn't work. It
Bad
does not
choice.
work at all.
Yeah. But
Sometimes a latte. Yeah.
they have a, I can't remember the name of the product, but they have a product that's like tastes like coffee and has caffeine in it, and then it has protein in it. And I'm
Mm.
like, I'm sure it's just not good for you at all, so I'll just keep trying to add the protein where I could squeeze it in and fit it, and I've definitely mastered it a little bit, and managed to.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but sometimes I eat a lot of tofu, which is a very easy way to add
Hmm.
protein. So adding protein, like adding tofu to like a shake or something like that can really, I can get like 60 grams of protein and like a protein shake, just like downing that on a day when I'm working out or something like that just makes me feel like, okay, I've conquered that for, this meal or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's really challenging. And
Actually, that reminds me, it
uh,
is.
go
That
ahead.
reminds me of an excellent point. When you are struggling to get enough protein, first, I want to say protein powder is fabulous. I'm a
Hmm.
huge fan,
Hmm.
particularly for people who have reduced appetite and are struggling to get sufficient protein or who are on a plant-based diet. It
Hmm.
makes it so much easier to
Yeah.
get the protein that you need. Yes, it's a processed food. However, it is very easy to find protein powders that don't have a lot of junk added to it. That is,
Yeah.
kind of like a pure whey protein isolate or a pea-based protein. And
Yeah.
using that can make a world of difference.
Hmm.
When you are struggling to get enough protein throughout the day, one of the recommendations that works really well for my clients is to consider front loading your protein. So, like that 60-gram protein shake
Hmm.
is fantastic
Yeah.
because then you only need to worry about getting, anywhere from, I'm imagining for you, 40 to 60 grams of protein in the other two meals that you're
Hmm.
having for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
If you can get if you can get a high dose of protein at your first meal,
Hmm.
then you don't have to worry about chasing the protein
Yeah.
as aggressively
Hmm.
for the rest of the day. Now, for individuals who are pre-diabetic or approaching that transition point to diabetes, having that first meal of the day be really high in protein will also help steady their blood sugar and reduce blood sugar spikes um, throughout the rest of the day. It really has an amazing long-term impact throughout the eating window when
Hmm.
you have a large dose of protein first thing in the morning.
Yeah, and that shake probably has more protein than I even realize, just because, I'm only counting the protein powder and then the
Mhm.
tofu, but then a lot of times I'll
Mhm.
add things like chia seeds or
Oh yeah.
flax, ground flax, and or sometimes
Yeah.
peanut butter and stuff like, or some kind of a nut butter, or sometimes pumpkin seeds I'll add, and
Hmm.
it just that adds more protein, and so
Yeah.
I beef it up. I'm glad that's a positive thing to do because I do that quite often because I
Yes.
just get so frustrated, and my appetite is not the problem. I have plenty of appetite, but it's eating the
That's a
right.
good thing in my opinion.
Yeah, I have a good appetite. I'm known for that, but not always for the best foods, So sometimes I have to
Yeah.
like
Well, yes.
try to focus on the healthy stuff. And I think overall, I do a really, really good job. I hate saying the word clean because I just hate that term,
Mm,
clean eating, but I
yeah.
really do. I don't eat a lot of processed foods. I don't eat a lot of sugar, like, white processed sugar. And so I'm amazed sometimes that I still have a problem. And losing the extra weight,
Yes.
like I really only technically gained 5 pounds, but it's the way my weight shifted because we're losing muscle mass, right?
Exactly.
And it's so I'm I'm definitely look at it as though I gained more than 5 pounds because I lost the muscle mass, which weighs more than, muscle weighs more than fat. And so
Hmm.
I'm thinking maybe I gained like 10 pounds because that's what it feels like. You know what I mean? It feels like that.
Right.
And
Right.
so changing up my exercise has been really hard for me because I love running, you know, and running a lot doesn't isn't really good at this stage in my life, and I know this
Hmm.
because it actually makes you hold on to more weight. And
Yes, it does. It
very
does.
frustrating because I really like it. So I've limited myself to 3 times a week. And then 2 of those times, I don't go over 3 miles because distance running specifically could really put you into that fight or flight
Hmm.
and really help make you hold on to that weight. And so,
Yeah. I
but
want to circle back around to that. I also, before we transition into the exercise piece, I want to address a common misconception that often comes up when with regards to protein intake.
okay,
There is a long-standing rumor out there that the body cannot absorb more than, I think, 20 to 30 grams of protein at one time, and
okay,
any extra is wasted. This is something that you'll see floating around on the internet, and this information comes from a study that looks specifically at how much protein muscles can absorb at one
okay,
time. However, protein is used by the entire body, and protein is absorbed, and a small amount of it can actually be temporarily stored in the digestive tract, and it is used by a whole host of other tissues other than just muscle. And so we can and do absorb more than 30 grams of protein in a meal. So if anybody has heard that, that's where that information came from. That is why it is incorrect. And feel free to go above that 30-gram threshold and consume more protein. It is absolutely not wasted, and it does not turn into fat.
okay. This is
Protein,
so important. Very important
it
point.
does not turn into fat. It is the macronutrient least likely to turn into fat by the body because the breaking down and absorption of protein by the body costs more calories than either fat or carbohydrate. It is more metabolically expensive to attempt to turn protein into fat than it is a carbohydrate food or a fat. Um, about 20 to 30% of the calories that we consume from protein are wasted in the process of metabolizing that protein.
Okay.
So you don't need to worry that overeating protein will make you fat unless you are also over consuming calories from carbohydrates as well as fats. The protein
Thank,
is the last thing that your body is going to turn into fat. And there have been studies done on men where they were like fed, I think it was like double the amount of protein that they needed, a
mhm.
huge, excessive amount of protein, and in excess of their caloric needs to see if it would turn into fat, and it did not.
Yes. And I loved the eye roll when you said on men because that's what we're dealing with because a lot of these studies are done on men and their bodies are so hormonally different than ours. And I would just imagine that I, I'm curious what the study would show for women. But thank you for making that point because it's really,
For
really
women.
important. I tend to like put like the blinders on when it comes to nutrition information that is out there because you really have to be careful. It's very overwhelming for people. And that's one of the
It is.
reasons why I wanted to do this show today because it's just so overwhelming. And I think we really
Yeah.
need to be able to take things into our own hands to a certain degree. Not only does it make you feel better to have a little bit of control, but also it makes you feel like you're doing something when nobody else is willing to help you. And so knowing that about protein
Yeah.
is a really good point.
Or able.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, it in we have to give our physicians and our gynecologists a little bit of compassion because they are not taught
they're not.
about menopause
No.
because there isn't data.
Yeah.
There isn't data. Even gynecologists
Yeah.
don't learn how to treat or how to deal with perimenopause and menopause.
Hmm.
And there was the nurses' health study that came out, gosh, was it the 80s or the 90s? No, I'm sorry. It's the Women's Health Initiative, not the Nurses' Health Study. And that was when they stopped putting women on HRT because there was an observed link with an increased risk of cancer
Hmm.
and heart disease. But what happened with that study was they put women on HRT who had already transitioned into menopause and in many cases had been postmenopausal for a decade or longer
Yeah.
and then took that evidence in that population and extrapolated it to all women going through perimenopause and postmenopause.
Yeah.
And what more current data shows is that that risk of heart disease and breast cancer, it does not apply for perimenopausal women or women who have recently transitioned into menopause.
Yeah. And it,
That said, it's a conversation to have with your physician and
exactly.
perhaps multiple physicians
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're coming across people who aren't aware of that information.
Yeah. It's really about, because every person is different. It's really about learning about what's going
Mhm.
to be right for you. And
Precisely.
and sometimes that does take multiple physicians to figure that out, unfortunately. And
Unfortunately.
and a lot of tests.
And a
But
lot of
a
testing.
lot of
Yeah.
tests. But the note that you made about the protein, though, also not turning into fat is important. And then also um, another point, I don't know if I need to make this point, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that when we start to move into, exercise and working out and muscle mass, you're not going to get all bulked up if you are loading with protein. You're not going to,
Yeah.
start looking like Popeye or anything like that. As a matter of fact, sometimes it feels like a losing battle just trying to maintain the muscle mass that you have. So it's very unlikely that you'll
That's exactly what's happening.
yeah.
Yeah. Even in our peak um bulking years. And I
Yeah.
say that, in
Yeah.
with air quotes and a little bit of an eye roll because, the women that you see in magazines or at bodybuilding competitions, they are in the gym 2 to 4 hours a day. Many of them are taking illegal substances to bulk up. This is not a typical normal outcome from
Mhm.
even doing CrossFit 3 times a week, right?
Yeah.
So do not be afraid to lift heavy. It is crucial. It is crucial because, again, with that loss of estrogen, you're losing a signal, a very regular, strong signal to hold on to muscle
Hmm.
in your body. And when we lose that signal that is inherent, we have to then use the external sources to remind our body to hold on to the muscle we have and to build more muscle, which is protective against diabetes, against cardiovascular disease, and against osteoporosis as we age.
Yeah.
Um, and those external sources come from, dietary protein as well as lifting heavy stuff. I don't
Hmm.
know if I can curse on this on
You
your
can, yeah,
podcast or not. I
feel
don't
free.
remember.
Feel free.
All right.
Yes, feel free.
Lifting heavy shit.
Yeah.
Ladies, lift heavy shit, hard, heavy shit.
Hmm.
Do it regularly. This
Hmm.
is perhaps even more than diet. And I do admit, as a nutritionist, I kind of hate saying that, but the data is much stronger and much more well established that having muscle mass as we age protects us from everything we're terrified of getting. It
Exactly.
reduces all-cause mortality. And if we do not, because most of us do not live in an environment where we are on the farm, chopping wood, hauling water, ripping out corn stalks and doing heavy landscaping as a daily task, we have to mindfully seek out that heavy shit to do in
Hmm.
order to build that muscle, in order
Yeah.
to maintain the muscle that we have. Otherwise, we will lose it, and that makes it easier to gain fat. And so, to your point about your muscle turning into fat, it isn't that your muscle has actually turned into fat. It's that you've lost muscle,
Hmm.
but because habits haven't adapted, right, to compensate for that, then it's easier for the body to put on fat in place of that muscle.
Yeah,
So some women, they don't actually notice a change on the scale, but they see their body shape change. They
exactly.
feel more dumpy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their arms are more like soft and squishy, and you get the little belly pouch. Now, the little belly pouch is actually is, to some extent unavoidable, very normal, and it is protective.
Mm-hmm.
The fat that accumulates there serves as almost as a very tiny estrogen reservoir because our fat cells do produce very low levels of hormones, including estrogen. And this is why, as we age, it's not necessarily a bad thing for some women. I won't say all, but for some women to have an extra 5, 10, even 15 pounds, depending on what their menopausal weight was, to have that a little bit of a hormone buffer. And also, in the event of illness, to just have a little bit extra
Mm-hmm.
to bounce back.
Yeah.
You don't want to be a frail elderly woman. You want to be a
No.
strong badass.
Yes. Yeah, and that's why I think it's important. I mean, as long as you're not gaining like a lot of weight on the scale,
Yes,
for example, it's more important to focus on building the muscle
precisely.
and feeling good, you know? And so like
Yes.
with for me, exercise creates energy, even though sometimes I can feel um, I don't recover as quickly. So I could feel tired after,
Hmm.
a lot of
Hmm.
exercise. I feel it just keeps my mood up. It gives me more energy. And um, I am the type of person who is out there pulling stuff out of the garden and hauling water. And I'm a farmer, right? So I do
Yeah,
that stuff, not every day, but the days that I do that, I count that as a workout because I literally
100%.
can't do anything else because I'm exhausted, you know. But the lifting heavy weights
Right.
thing has been really hard for me because I don't like to do it, you know, and I feel very, very, very lucky to have gone through a CrossFit stage in my 40s because I
Mm.
built up
Hmm.
a very large reserve of muscle. Like I was very, very strong. And I feel like I lost a lot of that,
Awesome.
but it was there. I built it up
Yeah.
and then I lost it. So I feel like I'm like back at, where I started kind of. Um, but yeah, I
Hmm.
feel like one of the things that was really helpful to me, somebody who does not like to lift weights, is, you know, lifting really heavy for shorter periods of time. So like if I like do
Right.
squats and I'm lifting, like I'm using 30-pound dumbbells on each side and I do 3 sets of, 15 squats, I feel like I could check that off for the day. Like, and that didn't take me that long. I did that. That was a benefit,
Precisely.
and so just try to squeezing it in those little bursts. And also, I have a love for kettlebell training. I don't know why, but I like it. I
Mm.
find it very easy. I like how a kettlebell swing works a lot of the muscles all at once. And
Yeah.
I feel like I have to switch to
It's
a
so
heavier.
efficient.
Yeah, I feel like I need a heavier kettlebell at this point because I'm like at 15 and it just feels easy now. But um, yeah,
Nice.
try a kettlebell. But I
And even, if the listener knows for herself that that's just like gym's weights, just never going to happen,
mhm,
then look for things around you that you can do that are heavy, hard, intense physical activity. Maybe you go into the garage and you pick up a 25-pound sack of compost and
mhm.
you just walk back and forth in the yard,
Yeah,
for 5 times back and forth. And
the
that
workout.
is weight-bearing activity. Fill a wheelbarrow with a couple of kids or grandkids and push them around.
Mhm,
There are other ways that you can lift heavy stuff that doesn't necessitate being in a gym, but it does need to be done consistently. And as you adapt and get stronger, you do need heavier and heavier things to keep that stimulus going and to
mhm.
ensure that you continue to make those gains and keep what you have, particularly if you are perimenopausal because when you transition into menopause and your estrogen levels are chronically low, it is even harder to
Mm-hmm.
keep that muscle on.
Yeah.
So, this is it's super important. I do also want to circle around and address the cardiovascular piece because like you, I love running. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
endurance runner. My body has always preferred I not be an endurance runner. And even in my 20s, I would gain weight during marathon training
Yeah.
because I believe anyway, I have an exaggerated cortisol response.
Mm-hmm.
And this, circling back to stress resilience, if some of the ways that you find stress relief is through high impact cardiovascular activity, particularly long duration cardio, this may end up doing more harm than good because of the physiological stress it puts on your body, even though it is emotionally your salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I understand very deeply and personally.
Yeah.
Running is my outlet, and I have to be extremely careful, particularly now that I am in my 40s, how much I do this. So, for my runners out there, trading in those long miles for sprint days, like one, no more than two sprint days a week, and going higher intensity but shorter duration
Mm-hmm.
can give you that emotional outlet and that endorphin rush, that runner's high. Um, and it's also exquisite for anybody going through perimenopause or in menopause because that high turnover rate with sprinting helps you maintain your um, power, which is something that also gets significantly diminished as we
Mm-hmm.
age, our power output and our speed, those fast twitch muscle fibers, which help us react to things like tripping and not falling, right? And
Mm-hmm.
balance, of course, becomes extremely important as we age. So if you are, doing sprint training um, once or twice a week, high intensity interval training is also fantastic. So basically, pushing really hard for no more than 30 seconds. You want to think all out effort and then allowing your body to recover and then pushing again. Anything like sprints, anything like high intensity interval training is not a workout you want to do for more than 30 minutes. And you shouldn't be in a position to want to keep going after
Yeah.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
If you can still go after 30 minutes, you haven't pushed hard enough during that session.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why you don't want to go long is because then we end up being in long duration, high intensity cardio. And there are a couple of problems with this as it relates to the perimenopause and postmenopause body. One is that we don't have a strong enough stimulus to, actually, I'm going to put a pin in that. One, we reduce our effort in order to go longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't get as many of the benefits with regards to increasing or maintaining power output, that high speed turnover with fast muscle fibers, right? And you also then become, the longer you do the higher, the high intensity activity, even though it's not highest intensity activity, the more you increase your cortisol levels for a longer period of time. And this is where it gets dicey. This is where we then have an elevated stress response from the cortisol, which happens during exercise. Exercise raises cortisol. If your heart
Mm-hmm.
rate is up, if you're starting to perspire, your cortisol is elevated. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's super important. However, we don't want it to stay high for long periods of time. This is when it can become a stress burden on the body that outweighs any health, that outweighs some of the health benefits that we're looking to achieve
Yeah.
with endurance cardio. So when you're doing this super high intense activity for a short duration of time, you do get that spike in cortisol. Now, what you want to do afterwards, so let's say you finish a session of 20 minutes of sprints or Tabatas or high intensity interval training, however that can look for you. Follow it up with at least 10 minutes of leisurely walking or yoga or another very restorative, calm, quiet movement. And
Hmm.
when I say leisurely walking, I'm talking about the kind of walking that you do with your dog, with a toddler, when you
Hmm.
are meandering through, like, say, Japanese gardens. I'm
Hmm.
not talking a power walk,
Yeah.
right? Very, very low intensity restorative walking. And this will reduce that cortisol that has been pushed up during the high intensity interval training and help you bring your cortisol levels back down. I will say that for my clients who, like me, tend to tend to have an exaggerated stress response and appear a little bit extra in the cortisol department, it's non-negotiable. You
Hmm.
got to do it because your body is already operating at a higher level of stress, and you need to do as much as you can to reduce that stress. And for some of those individuals, asking them to quit running altogether or whatever can create sufficient enough emotional duress that
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily leave them better off physically. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very hard balance. And I think that
Hmm.
I like running is really social to me also because I like to do races and I
Yeah.
do races with my kids. And so it's really important to me. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to train, but I think the point that you make as far as, trying to reduce your cortisol levels after they've been up, even if it's for a longer period of time, um, is really important. And I do a lot of yoga. That's one of the things that not only does it make me stronger, but it also um, it helps me work muscles that I'm not going to work when I'm, lifting weights or running or anything like that. It helps me stay
Right.
flexible. I think it also, it's stress relief for me. So I'll do like a short yoga
Hmm.
class. I do everything at home because I live in the middle of nowhere. There's no gyms, right? So I'm lifting weights at home. I'm doing yoga at home. I'm using YouTube videos, and after that, I'll do like a yoga nidra meditation, which is one of the most,
Awesome.
yeah, it's one of the most relaxing things to me. So instead of doing an hour-long yoga class, I'd rather do 20, 30 minutes of yoga and then do a 20-minute yoga nidra. I, After working out, it's almost like the rest that my body needed. And it helps with recovery because yoga nidra isn't just like a meditation. They call it, I can't remember the exact words. I think it's like um, deep rest without sleep. So you get like the same effects that you would if you took a nap or something like that. It's like a
Mm.
power nap that really helps you restore. But at the same time, it just for me it's very relaxing. So if that's something that no one's ever heard of, yoga nidra, there's plenty of free recordings on YouTube. It's been absolutely life changing to me. And it's funny because a lot of people do it at night to fall asleep. I can't do it at night before bed. I get like antsy. It's too long. But after like a
Oh,
workout where I'm
wow.
like tired, it's like I welcome that rest.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like a extended shavasana kind of, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
That sounds perfect.
yeah, it's
Because
really,
I did say, at least 10 minutes of leisurely walking or yoga, but ideally you'd want to do, 30 or even 60 minutes of a leisurely activity after something high
yeah.
intensity.
I do have a question, something that I've been doing, and I feel like it's definitely something that's becoming more popular because I see other women doing it, and it is wearing the weighted vests when you walk
Mm.
to add that
Hmm.
extra, that weight bearing, to make it like a weight bearing exercise. And I find myself doing that sometimes instead of running because I'm like, I need to get out and do something. I need to get out in nature. And then I know I'm not going to lift weights today. So at the very least, I'm going to put my weighted vest on and go for a walk. So what do you think about doing something like that?
I think that's fantastic. It's a
Yeah.
great way to add weight that is much more comfortable than, say, carrying hand weights and walking. And to some degree much more effective because you can typically put more weight on a vest and walk around with it than you can, carry dumbbells.
Mm-hmm.
That said, if you do that for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, then your body has become adapted to that weight. And so then you kind of reach that limit and you would need to then increase the weight again or put a backpack on
Mm-hmm.
with the weighted vest. And people with weighted backpacks too, rucking
Yeah.
is what it's called. And that's another way that you can add weight to your walks to strengthen your legs, to put muscle on your legs
Mm-hmm.
without, again, going into the gym, um, and really, stimulate the muscle to stay put and even grow a little bit.
Yeah, there are some weighted vests that have you could add and take away weight. So I would encourage people to do that. I did
Hmm.
not do that. So yeah, my vest is getting like an old friend to me now, where it just feels normal. I could clean the house in it and stuff, but yeah,
Right.
I would encourage getting something that you can kind of manipulate a little bit. But on that note, we talked about a lot of different stuff, but before we go, if you could add a little bit of something about like mentally, um,
Mm.
dealing with the transitions. One of the things I have to offer, and I would love to hear what you have to offer to people that's definitely helped me, um, is talking about it more, not keeping it to myself,
Yeah.
talking to my kids about it excessively to the point where they know every detail about my menopause journey. But I think it's really important because it was something that was never talked about, like from generations before us. And then creating a community for yourself with other women, letting them know that they could talk openly about it with you, I think has been one of the most positive ways to handle some of the anxiety and the stress. It's just feeling like you're not alone and that there's, 50% of the population are
Right.
really going to go through the same thing that you're going through. So, do you have any, last minute tips on how to deal with it mentally?
For myself, I always remind myself that this moment will pass.
Mm-hmm.
Whether this moment is I'm freaking out and I'm freaking out that I'm freaking out and I'm starting to like spiral, right? Or just sometimes what feels like the impossibility of trying to hold down the fort as part of, the sandwich generation, where I have aging parents that are going through a very concerning phase of life and also young children at home
Mm-hmm.
and being stretched in different directions. And in my situation specifically, across continents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even in that, now is not forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I also look at the information that's coming at me when there's a lot of stuff happening at once and ask myself, what can I control? Because there are some things I can't control,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can't control whether or not my father is going to take his medication unless I am physically there, giving it to him and coercing him to swallow it.
Yeah.
So if I do not have if I do not have control, I do the very best I can to release it. There is enough going on that I can take action and I can take control over. I am not going to be preoccupied about things which I do not have control over. So, what remains that I can take action on? And then I look over this and it's like, okay, what is, with the knowledge that I have right now, what is the best course of action I can take? And sometimes that's, well, I need more knowledge in order to understand what the best course of action is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just life's got to play itself out.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't see far enough into the future to know what to do in the moment. And in that situation, I let go in this moment until the information that's coming in gives me something that I can take action on. And that has likely saved my family and I a great deal of grief in the last year. Um, it is not necessarily an intuitive or easy task, but the moment that you can emotionally step out of the situation and become the observer, looking down at the chaos, is the moment that you can then start to ask that question. What can I actually take control of here? And what isn't mine to own in the first place or is beyond my control? One of the things that is such a blessing for our generation is that we can talk openly
Yeah.
about perimenopause and menopause. We can talk to our friends. And I was actually having coffee with a friend this morning, and she was talking about her own transition and how, she talks about it often enough that her kids will be like, Mom, are you doing the menopause thing again right now? She,
Yes, that checks out for me too.
she's having a moment. It's like,
Yeah.
and she's like, it's not PMS. It's not like PMS. It's all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
It's really true.
so
Yeah.
And our mothers didn't have that. Our grandmothers didn't have that. And I can't imagine going through this without having someone to talk to about it. It
Hmm.
just sounds horrific.
Yeah.
So kudos to us for breaking the silence.
Yeah.
That said, we are also the first generation to buy the story that we can and should do it all.
Hmm.
And this is a story we need to let go of,
Hmm.
because the stress of trying to be all things for all people will make this process much harder than it needs to be.
Yeah. You know what? That I think that's the perfect note to end on because, and I have to add, I can let go of things like doing it all so much easier now than I used to be able to. And I feel like that's a blessing of just moving into a different era of my life.
Yeah.
I could feel myself transitioning into a different era, and I really like it. And I think as I move into it, I just feel a lot of freedom in there, and I feel like that's something to look forward to, that freedom.
Mm.
But that last thing that you talked about, letting go, like I think that overall, not just when it comes to like talking about menopause and perimenopause, just life in general, like just the
Yeah.
weight of the world right now. Um, I feel like that's just one of the best things that we could, leave with the listeners right now is learn how to let go of the things that you can't control and release, let it go with the clouds and the wind and just
100%.
yeah, see you later kind of deal. But I think that was beautiful advice. And yes, community and sharing and talking are very important also. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing all your wisdom. I always benefit when I talk to you. I feel like I'm getting like a
Oh,
free
thank you.
session. I'm just like, oh, this feels so, I always learn something. I always learn something new. Like I did not know that protein helps with blood sugar. I did not know that. See, so I always learn something new. But I always learn a lot from you.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it was such a pleasure to have you on. And I'm sure we'll do this again at some point. And just thank you so much.
An absolute pleasure. I would love to be back anytime you'd like to have me.
All right. Just before we go, I almost forgot. Like, I almost forgot to say this. I'm so used to
Mm.
talking to you. Before we go, how can people connect with you?
Oh, yes, of course. There are a couple of ways.
Mhm.
If anybody wants to, kind of learn more about my approach to nutrition or is actively looking for someone to help them kind of gauge their carbohydrate tolerance or how to transition into forms of activity that are appropriate for them, I can be found at vibrancenutrition.com. That's VIBRANCE nutrition.com. I also have a podcast called Blasphemous Nutrition, which is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we will talk again soon.